Bonjour. Welcome to Club Book with Angeline Boulley. I'm Marcy Rendon, White Earth Ojibwe from Minneapolis, and also an author and a friend of Angeline's. Before I introduce tonight's guest properly, allow me a moment to tell you a bit more about the unique series that is bringing her to us. Club Book is a program of MELSA, the Metropolitan Library Service Agency, made possible through Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and coordinated by Library Strategies. Part of the Friends of the St. Paul Public Library, Dakota County Library is the co-organizer of this evening's talk. We want to thank the bookseller Red Balloon Bookshop. A purchase link to Firekeeper's Daughter will be available in the comments section of this live feed stream. You can have it shipped, pick it up at their lovely bookstore in St. Paul, or have them deliver it personally to your door if you're in this area. Final housekeeping note, in the comments section, you'll be able to see a survey link. MELSA would greatly appreciate hearing what you think of this Club Book program. The survey is quick and easy. Our guest tonight, Angeline Boulley, is a member of the Sault Ste. Marie Tribe of Ojibwe Indians and former director of the Office of Indian Education at the United States Department of Education. Her upbringing and firsthand knowledge of Native life informed Boulley's blockbuster YA debut, Firekeeper's Daughter. The instant #1 New York Times bestseller centers around Daunis Fontaine, a biracial Anishinaabe teenager described by the author as an Indigenous Nancy Drew. Fontaine finds herself part of an undercover FBI operation to root out the source of a lethal narcotic ravaging the Ojibwe reservations in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. In a starred review, Publishers Weekly praises the novel for its treatment of hard issues such as citizenship, language revitalization, and the corrosive presence of drugs on Native communities. Higher Ground, the production company of Barack and Michelle Obama, is currently adapting Firekeeper's Daughter for a series on Netflix. We'll visit with Angeline, and then we'll have time for audience question and answer. You can drop your questions in the comments thread here on Facebook, and our tech manager will route them to me. If you'd prefer to ask a query a bit more anonymously, you can also send a private message, Club Book, here on Facebook, or send an email to clubbookmn@gmail.com. Angeline, hi. That was a mouthful.
That was.
Wow.
It's a pleasure to be here with you tonight, Marcy, and congratulations. I just came from the event honoring you, the recipient of the McKnight Award, and kudos to you. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that was an honor, and it was very moving. And I'm thrilled that so many of my really good friends showed up and were able. This whole pandemic thing is made in-person things kind of a thing of the past, seems like.
I agree.
So do you want to say a little bit more about who you are and your writing, the trajectory of your writing before I dive into the questions that I have?
Sure. Okay, well, bonjour, Anin, Angeline Boulley, Nadeshikas, Makwadodam, Bawating and Donjiba, Chimagwech. Hello, everyone. I'm Angeline Boulley, Bear Clan, and I am from Sault Ste. Marie and Sugar Island in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. And it's an honor to be here with you today. I'm going to start with a very short reading, probably about 2 minutes, 3 minutes tops. I like to start this, it's chapter 2, it's the beginning of chapter 2. And I like it because of the interaction with that Donnis has and the love she has for her best friend Lily and Granny June, Lily's Granny June. So, okay. Chapter 2. Lily's Jeep screeches into the driveway. Wearing all black as usual, my best friend hops out so I can climb into the back seat. Granny June sits in the front, headscarf tied under her chin, dark brown eyes barely peeking over the dashboard. Between tiny Lily and her great-grandmother, it's a wonder either can see the road. Lily's been my best friend since 6th grade when she came to live with Granny June. We look like opposites, and not just because of our height difference. I am so pale, the other Nish kids called me Ghost, and I once overheard someone refer to me as that washed out sister of Levi's. When Lily lived with her Jaganash dad and his wife, they kept her out of the sun so her reddish brown skin wouldn't get any darker. We both learned early on that there is an acceptable Anishinaabe skin tone continuum, and those who land on its outer edges have to put up with different versions of the same BS. Lily's smile is outlined in glossy black lipstick. It grows wider as she takes in my outfit, jeans paired with one of my dad's hockey jerseys extending to mid-thigh. Lady Donnis in her finest gown, it's my pleasure to drive thee, she bows. I grin, and it feels like when I slip off a backpack loaded with all my school books. I should sit back there. Too much work for you, Granny June says, watching as I flip the driver's seat forward and wedge my nearly 6-foot tall frame into the back. It's like seeing a baby crawl back into the womb. She says this every time we both hitch a ride with Lily. No way, Granny June, you're the best co-pilot. You do not make an elder accommodate you. You just don't.
All right. Beautiful, beautiful. So in your author's notes, you say, it is paramount to share and celebrate what justice and healing looks like in a tribal community. Can you elaborate on how you do that in your storytelling and in Donnis's journey?
Yes, great question. I would say that how I do that is showing the caring, the relationships, the bonds between people. There's an interaction with Donnis and I would say like her hockey nemesis, Macy. And there's a point in the story when Donnis warns Macy about something. And, you know, this is a person she doesn't like, but there's that bond of looking out and protecting her as an Indigenous woman. So I looked for opportunities to show things that I've experienced, you know, whisper networks, ways in which women support one another, ceremonies, and other forms of justice. You know, those aunties and grandmas that at times will take matters into their own hands. And so I just wanted to tell a story that just felt very true to what I know.
Okay. And Donnis, you know, there's so many like subtle details of that story in your story. I guess that's, yeah. This next question I've kind of taken, I hope I'm not, what do they call that? Like jumping too far ahead, giving away a spoiler. It's on page 236. You write, and I've pulled a passage out where you wrote, I have wanted ever since I understood that about being and this is Donnis. I have wanted this ever since I understood that being Anishinaabe and being an enrolled citizen weren't necessarily the same thing. My mind races, remembering Granny's unsuccessful efforts to get this for Lily. I can become a member, except it changes nothing about me. I am Anishinaabe. Since my first breath, even before, when my new spirit traveled here, I will be Anishinaabe even when my heart stops beating and I journey to the next world. So, I mean, there is so much packed in that that short passage, there's teachings, there's Anishinaabe teachings, there's the history, there's the longing that's so prevalent in contemporary Native communities, that's a result of so much dislocation. And then there's also about the welcoming of those who want to come home. So it's like, how did you all get that into one little succinct piece? And yeah, what was your thinking process or the writing process of, it's kind of like you're giving something to us as Native people, but you're also like telling our story in a way that other people can get an understanding of who we are.
Yes.
I just want to hear more about
Yeah.
that.
Miigwech for that. So that comes at a point in the story, Donnis, who's grown up unenrolled in her tribe because her father was not put on her birth certificate. And the complications of that. And I've worked in different tribal communities, and I've worked in DC. I've traveled a lot and been in different communities, and each tribe, has the sovereign right to determine membership, citizenship for their tribe. And there are so many people though that fall between the cracks. Enrollment is not a perfect system, no matter what tribe you're in. And I guess I just wanted to speak to that because I saw the impacts on students. I saw students who, if their tribe sponsored a special activity and they, and they went to the tribe's after school program, of that feeling of, well, can I go to that event too? Or is that only for members of this tribe? And, and just our kids are dealing with issues of belonging anyway. And so to add enrollment, blood quantum, colorism, microaggressions, like all of these things are this additional burden. And our kids have to, this is why I loved writing it as a young adult story, is because with young adults, so much of the themes are claiming your identity and finding your place in your community. And that's very much what Donnis's journey is about. It's dressed up like a thriller, but at its heart, it's this coming of age story that I felt a lot of Indigenous teens might relate to parts of it. And I wanted to include other things like, her friend Lily being a darker skinned Native and facing other struggles and not being able to be enrolled for some like really technical reasons. And so I just wanted it out there as something that we could discuss, and just that awareness that our teens, our kids are all too aware of the whole belonging and not belonging. And my hope is that teens claim their identity. And because I think once you do that, it helps you navigate the world.
I think it's also a place in that whole storyline where teenagers across the board are wanting, they're either wanting to belong or they want to like, nah, get me over here. And so it seems like it's a something that can speak to all teenagers, not just Native teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
Were you thinking about that when you were writing, or is that just sort of what happened?
Well, I just knew that, how Donnis has this thinking of, there's hockey world and regular world. There's her Ojibwe family on her father's side, and there's her, Jaganash side on her mother's side, and science world, and all these different ways that Donnis has learned to cope. She splits her identity into these different things, and she knows when it's safe to be this and when it's safe to be this. And really she comes into her power, her strength, when she melds everything together and accepts every part of her. And you know, integrating all these parts, facets of her.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so yeah, I thought that would be a good journey for teens of any background to relate to.
Okay. And like you said, this is a thriller. Wait, no, you said
It's
a
a
coming
coming of
of
age story dressed
disguise.
up like a thriller.
Okay. Um, and so, which kind of brings me to this next question about your book covers some of the jurisdictional issues faced in Indian country. And I'm wondering if you could talk about that a bit, just the um, different jurisdictional issues. And I know that, like this story is about Donnis and crime on the reservation and FBI involvement and undercover work. And I'm not sure, and I honestly think that most people don't know anything really about the difficulties of not just difficulties, that's the wrong word.
These
The difference.
obstacles to justice
Yes.
that impact our communities in ways that most people don't know about or aren't aware of, that whether or not the perpetrator is Native, whether or not the victim is Native, whether or not it happens on federal land or tribal land, and whether it happens off. And a lot of our tribes have, that checkerboard jurisdiction where the tribe owns this part of land, they own this part of land, they own this, but they don't own it all contiguous. And so, in the case of the crime, one of the crimes that happens in the story, it's a matter of the crime happened at the tribal hotel. And because of that, the federal government has jurisdiction over whether or not to prosecute. And that's why so many of our community members do not get justice. They do not get their day in court. And my book talks a little bit about the other ways that we try to get justice. And other books like David Heska Wandley Waden, his Winter Counts, I believe, also talks about this like vigilante type system. And, these things come up because justice denied people will seek justice on their own when they feel they have no other avenues.
So the book is a YA novel. And so I'm just wondering how much research and what kind of research did you have to do in order to get this information across to those readers?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big jump in my mind as a writer,
Yeah. Well, I had some really good connections throughout Indian country. One of my best sources was a retired FBI agent named Walt Lamar. And, he's Blackfeet. And once we established trust, like I could ask him anything. And he's so forthcoming he's got so many interesting stories. He needs to write a book. And, I had other contacts, and one of the connections just out of the blue, I was at some city meeting in Sault Ste. Marie and went out to dinner with some people, and I sat next to this Lake State professor, and he was a former state trooper. And I was talking about my book because I always talked about, I'm writing this book. And he was really intrigued by it. And he said, there's a workshop coming up on meth, making meth and identifying clandestine meth labs. And he said, if I could make arrangements, would you want to go to the State Police Academy and attend this workshop? I mean, I was like, of course I will. I would gladly burn 8 hours of vacation leave to hightail it down to Lansing and go to this. And so, yeah, just exhaustive research. That's, I mean, when you're a writer and you get down those, we call them rabbit holes, you're on the internet and you're looking for this, and then yeah, you end up knowing so much about things that might not even make it into the book, but it's all part of the process.
So do you have a particular thing that didn't get into the book that you thought, oh, I wanted that in there and then couldn't get it in?
Oh gosh. I'd really be hard pressed to think of something that didn't. There were some things about the language that I just, that got, that I edited out. So
about the
yeah.
Ojibwe language.
Mhm.
And why did you edit them out?
Oh, I think it was like in the story there were, I mean, I was pushing 500 pages. And so there were things that I was looking to streamline. But I feel very good about the Anishinaabe Moen that is included in the story. I purposely did not have a glossary. I did that because I wrote the story in first person present tense point of view. The reader is inside Donnis's head as things are happening. And because she knows her language and cultural teachings, thanks to Aunt Teddy and other Firekeeper relatives, our language is just how she views the world. And so, that's why I didn't italicize, because it's not a foreign language. And I didn't want a glossary. I just thought if I did a good enough job as a writer, that the reader would be able to glean the meanings of things. I will say one thing I wish I had done, and I could still do it, is I'd love to do a bookmark and have like a Anishinaabe Moen pronunciation guide to help people. And so maybe I'll work on that and send that out, like people on my author newsletter list. So.
Okay. And where did the character Donnis come from? Like, how did she arrive for you? Different writers have different ways of getting at.
Yeah. Originally, she started out a lot like me, light-skinned Ojibwe girl. And then the more drafts that I got into it, I guess the stronger she became and the more independent she was of me. And so she's better in science and math than I could ever be. And I've never played hockey a day in my life. And so it was just that confidence that her character really spoke to me. And I was confident that she could be very different from me, and I could still write her experience. So yeah, that's. Yep.
So I know that I've heard you talk before, and I've read a couple interviews and where you said that you have been working on this story since high school, or that's when the idea first came to you.
Yes.
So maybe do you want to talk about that a bit?
Well, I was 18 and I was a senior in high school, and one of my friends went to a nearby high school. She told me about a new guy senior year. She thought he was my type. It turned out he was not. He didn't play sports, and he hung out with all the partiers. Well, flash forward right before graduation, evidently there was a drug bust, and it turned out that new guy had been an undercover cop. And they had a school assembly, and he spoke to the students and said, like what he had done. And I remembered thinking, what if we had met? What if we'd liked each other? And then I thought, what if it wasn't that he liked me, but that he needed my help? And then the idea that stayed with me was, why would an undercover drug investigation need the help of an ordinary Ojibwe girl.
Mm.
And, then I graduated high school, I went on to college, I ended up working for different tribal communities, and I always worked with teens. And I started working out these puzzle pieces like, oh, if it was a federal investigation, oh, if it was something that involved the culture, if she knew science, chemistry, and knew her culture and language, she actually would be the ideal confidential informant. And then what complications would that be for her as an Indigenous person to be helping with this type of an investigation? So, her distrust from the get-go about this. So yeah, that's how it started. Even though I didn't start writing until I was 44, those years between 18 and 44, I was still creating the story, even though I wasn't writing it. Yeah. And I think people think that writing a story is time in front of the, time on the keyboard. And it's not. Creating a story, so much happens here. It happens, writing is actually the least of it. So yeah.
And while you were working these things out in your mind, were you taking notes and like sticking them in a drawer, or were they just like in file cabinets in your brain?
File cabinets in my brain. That's a good way to put it. Like, waiting for my son at hockey practice, dropping off my kids here or there. Yeah. And I'd just be like thinking things through, and yeah.
And is that the only story that you worked on in that time period, or were there
Yes.
other stories? This was it.
No, this was it.
Oh.
And when I finished it at 54 and I got an agent and got published at 55, I'm now 56. I thought, well, if this is the only story I've got, I'm fine with that. I'm just, I'm going to make it as epic as possible. And if this is the only story I tell, I'm happy with it. Well, but then one day I was out for a walk. It was a Sunday. I lived in a neighborhood in DC, and I was out walking, and all of a sudden this character's voice popped into my head. And she said, I stole everything they think I did, and even stuff they don't know about yet. And I was like, wait, who is this? And I ran into the nearest place, and it was like this cheese deli bar, restaurant, everything.
Yeah.
So I run up to the bar and I go, I need a piece of paper and a pen and a Chardonnay. And I just like sat there and did this like stream of consciousness writing this character that was like sitting in a police station covered in blood, and like, how did I get here? And honestly, that was the day I felt like a writer. When I knew I had more than one story in me.
Wow.
That was a good day.
So that was going to be, I'll jump ahead. That was going to be my last question. Is that a sneak peek at your next book?
Yes.
Okay.
So if book one was Indigenous Nancy Drew or Indigenous Veronica Mars, book two is Indigenous Lara Croft. It'll have a different protagonist, and it's instead Lara Croft, instead of raiding tombs, though, she is reclaiming ancestors to bring back home to Sugar Island from museums and private collectors. And one of her heists goes very badly. So it's not a traditional sequel per se, but it's still set in the same community, and you'll see familiar faces.
Okay, and I forgot what my question was going to be there. I had one other question. Let's see. In your author's notes, you credit a friend Barb with being a source by saying she would say to you, and I'm assuming this is like she would read your manuscript and she'd say a res girl wouldn't talk like that. Can you talk a bit about Native vocabulary, nuances of language, things that might or might not ring true in the writing, and why this is important to the work?
Yeah. my best friend Barb, yeah, she like tells it to me straight. And if I write something and it doesn't ring true, she'll be the first one to tell me. My cousin Deb will be the second one who will tell me. And I just trust and value them so much. I think in an earlier manuscript that Barb read, Donnis told Jamie that she wasn't dancing because she was on her moon time. And Barb was like, she's not gonna tell him that, like, and so that just, yeah, there were some other things too, of things that she revealed to him, and Barb was like, she's not gonna, she's not spilling her guts to him. And so, yeah, it just, that kind of thing. I mean, if you have those people in your life who are brutally honest with you, hold on to them, because that's gold.
And I mean, as a writer, I think it's important, it's important to the work that, and to the integrity of the work that we're working on. And so, how do you expect, or how do we as Native writers expect non-Native readers to navigate those nuances? Do you think about that? Do you?
I mostly care what my Native readers are thinking, like the people in my community. I kind of was writing things, taking out things, and really being guided by what someone in my community might say about a particular aspect of the story. I've been like really pleasantly surprised by non-Native readers who who relate to different characters in the book. And that was something I wasn't expecting as much. I thought, people would be, oh, that's interesting, but I didn't think they would relate on a personal level the way that they have. And with different characters than what so yeah.
Huh, cool. So we have some questions from the audience. One comment first is, somebody says, our book club loved the relationship of Lily and Donnis.
Yeah.
Do you have anything that you want to say about that relationship?
Well, I will say that my sister, Sarah, was a year and a half younger than me, and she passed in a car accident when she was 29. I was 31. She's been gone for 25 years now. And so much of writing about the book, or writing the book, was about me processing grief, and just missing this person so terribly, even after 25 years. That pain, it changes, but it's still there. Yeah. And so yeah, the way that Lily parallel parks is the way that my sister Sarah would parallel park. And when my parents read that in the book, they were like, yeah, we know, that's very familiar. So just little things like that, yeah.
Yeah, okay. This next question, I picked up the book and read it because of the beautiful cover art. My librarian said it was actually designed by an Ojibwe artist. Is this true? And what was your involvement in the decision-making around the cover? And I had the same question about the title. Did you pick the title?
Yeah, that was always the title. Okay. From the first draft, everything. Wow.
Yes. Okay. So then back to the other question about the artwork. So debut authors generally don't get much say in certain aspects of the book, but my publisher's been very good to me, Macmillan, and I'm published under an imprint, Henry Holt Books for Young Readers. And
they knew that representation was really important to me. And so that I would prefer an Indigenous artist, preferably Ojibwe, because I just love our beautiful floral artwork, the vibrant colors, just the beauty of it. And so the art director for Macmillan found Moses Lunham, who is Ojibwe, and he's from Kettle and Stony Point First Nation in Ontario. And yeah, Moses read an earlier version of the manuscript, not the final one. And he came, he and Rich Dees came up with all of, this concept. And I was able to have a little bit of input, but really it was, minor things. So I'm just very thankful that, my publisher saw that value, and I think it should be standard. I don't think it should be like best practices. I think anytime a person is writing from their lived experience in their community, the importance of the art also being represented. And they also, I wanted an Indigenous narrator for the audiobook, and they were excited about that. And so my book is read by Isabella Starr LeBlanc, who is a stage actress from Minneapolis, and she is Dakota. And just her audition sample was incredible. Her Granny June, and her Donnis sounded the way Donnis sounds in my head.
Okay.
And right from the get-go. And then because she had a great Granny June voice, I was like, yep, that's her.
So people can read the book and listen to it.
Yes. And we worked really hard on the Anishinaabe, the pronunciations. So if readers are struggling and really want to hear how the words are pronounced, the audiobook is really wonderful.
Cool. Another audience question: was there a true case where meth was hidden in hockey pucks?
No, but there was a true case of a tribal judge being involved in protecting a family member's business enterprise. And there was also an actual case with a young man who felt that if there were going to be drug dealers selling to tribal members, a tribal member should be reaping the economic benefits of those dollars. And so that justification was helpful. Reading that case, it was really helpful to me to get into the mindset of how a young person might feel that way about justifying selling drugs, being involved with drug production in their community.
Yeah. Another question: did you consider breaking the book into a series? This person says would love to know more of Jamie's backstory and some of the other characters also.
Well, I do have, books planned and envisioning different main characters. Jamie's story, I don't know if I could tell that as a young adult story. I think I need to tell that one as an adult book with flashbacks to his younger, because I that's how I would tell his story. He's got one. So.
And do you have like notebooks or note cards, or there's some word program where people keep notes on the side where you're tracking all of this?
Yes, I do. I keep track of my notes now. I do a much better job with research and note keeping, because for book one, I mean, over those 10 years, I'm still finding like scraps of paper, and it's like, oh, I meant to include that. Like, and so, yeah, I'm always coming across a slip of paper. So now I try to be more organized and keep my notes more organized and things like that.
And did you have a college, like an MFA in creative writing?
No, I think I had one creative writing class in college, but no, I was a psychology and business management major. And then my master's degree is in public administration, political science, rather than an MFA. And I kind of felt some imposter syndrome maybe, until I realized that I was a storyteller and my training was as a grant writer. And when I realized that every grant that I wrote for any tribal community I worked for, whatever my job title was, I also wrote grants. And the ability to tell a compelling narrative about an issue in your community, why you need the grant money, how you're going to address it, how you know you'll be successful. And to do that in 35 pages, or 40 pages or less, that's a skill. And once I thought about my ability to write, and I felt validated that my training was different from other writers, but it was no less valid, that helped me get over any, feeling of missing out on an MFA.
It is so wonderful to have a book in which young Anishinaabe women can see themselves as strong, loving, and culturally aware. Thank you so much for a wonderful story filled with varied and realistic people that takes place on a reservation. There you go.
Miigwech.
The combination compliment and question. Thank you for this incredible book. Teens love your book, and it shows that teens do read. My question: we are having a watershed moment right now for Indigenous and Native representation in books, TV, and media. What are your hopes and dreams for Native visibility and awareness in a broader sense throughout the country?
I think Standing Rock, I think, changed things. The Dakota Access Pipeline protests, I think, brought more visibility than ever before for Native communities and Native people. And I think that young adult literature, just there are so many outstanding Native authors that publishing is paying attention to. We've always had incredible storytellers and authors. They just weren't necessarily getting, the deals or getting noticed. I really hope that, a book like mine might spark interest in people of, well, that's one tribe, that's one story. There's so many other stories. And so I just hope that people want more and realize the differences between communities. Like Tommy Orange's book, There really shed a light on the urban Indian experience that people previously had not, thought about that. My book features a tribe that is doing well economically. They have a prosperous gaming casino, and they give per capita payments to members. And that story had not been out there. So I think the more wonderful stories that are out there, we get to see different nuances, and because there can be no one great Native American story, because we are not a monolith. And we have so much diversity within our communities that, the answer is more stories, not looking for one singular voice.
There's 500 some different tribes?
574 at last count.
Yep. Different languages, different ceremony, different
history, ceremony. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
let's see. A few questions about language. Would you speak about your own language learning? Like, is English or Ojibwe your first language? And then this person writes, the written form looks so daunting. Are Ojibwe children instructed in the written form?
No, no, you know, Ojibwe is best learned oral, just hearing it. It's so beautiful when you hear a fluent speaker and just the cadences and that beauty. So my dad was a first language speaker. He was raised by his great grandmother. And so he grew up like his first few years, primarily speaking only the language. And growing up in Sault Ste. Marie in the 1940s and 50s as a darker skinned Ojibwe man, it was rough. And so he joined the Navy. He met my mom, who's not Native. And he made a decision not to teach us the language. And he's since, regretted it and wishes he could have a do-over. But he made a loving decision. And that helped me because I was angry. My kids went to a tribal school, and I had one in particular, one of my kids really picked up the language and would joke, like tell a joke in the language to the language teacher, Helen Roy. And I told my dad about it, and he was like, oh, that's so good. Keep the kids in the language, keep that with them. And I had some resentment, like, I wish I had it to give to my kids. But once you learn more about, gosh, boarding school era and, all of the reasons why things were so difficult and how a person could come to that decision that to protect us, he thought that's what he was doing. So, yeah, so I love listening to it. I can generally tell what people are saying, but I'm so not confident in speaking it. I'm that generation that hungers for it, but is really hesitant and shy to try to say words that, so.
So I know that in Duluth, Minnesota, there's an immersion school. And I believe it's from kindergarten on up, they are learning the language, and that there are questions about the writing of it.
Mhm.
The double vowel, is it not double vowel? Are we doing
Yes.
syllabics? It's like and we didn't have any of that pre-contact,
Yeah.
so it's all new. We're all learning
Oh,
people knew how to speak it, but there wasn't a written language.
well, my dad is still upset with me that I opted to go with the double vowel system in the book rather than phonetics, because my dad, if he writes it down, he spells it phonetically.
Yeah.
But really, Dr. Margaret Noden from University Wisconsin, Milwaukee, really made a compelling case for using the double vowel system and having that my book could be a supplemental text in courses about about the language.
Yeah.
And that really was the deciding factor that I did was, the double vowel system kind of standardizes pronunciation and spellings. And so, yeah, but my dad still thinks I should have done it differently. So,
Yeah. A couple more questions here. What are some specific goals you have in seeing this story come alive on screen? And are there any moments you think will be more challenging to portray in a different medium? So once it goes to screen.
I'm just thrilled. I'll be thrilled to see it on screen. I'll be an executive producer, but honestly, I don't know what that really means. So I won't be writing for it because I want to write book 2 and get into more writing. I'm just excited because in my mind's eye, I've cast these roles for over 10 years, and I have a Pinterest page. Funny because I've been working on the book for so long that actors that I originally wanted for certain roles, they're like aged out now. And
Yeah.
so, but yeah, just the up and coming actors, I'm just excited and hope that the series provides a great opportunity to just showcase Native creative talent, not just in front of the camera, but behind it in the writer's room at all levels. And I trust Higher Ground they share that value.
Yeah, yeah. So this next one is actually a two-part question. In your writing, how do you center Anishinaabe ways and values without crossing a line? It talks about centering cultural teachings such as plant medicines in the narrative.
I shared some things. There was one that I shared, a plant teaching, and there was a student, her name's Destiny Sky Little Pete, and she had a high school science fair project, and that was the chokecherry pudding. And she showed how preparing that pudding in the traditional way, grinding the seeds instead of straining them out, that's what had the cancer fighting properties. And I got a hold of her on Facebook and asked for permission to use to have that be Donnis's science fair project and give Destiny credit in the in the acknowledgments.
Yeah.
And I'm really happy that she said yes. And so, the things that I shared were things that I felt comfortable sharing. I didn't feel that I crossed line. I was careful about that. I'm glad that earlier drafts of my book did not get published, because I think it was a learning process of knowing, oh, I should not be sharing that. Oh, I should not be telling that story. So I'm thankful it took 10 years.
Okay. And what has been the response at Sault Ste. Marie? Both to the book and to you, like you're a superstar now.
Well, it's been so good. I think one thing that helped is that I fictionalized the name of the tribe, and I took creative license with some of the aspects of the tribe, and I think that helped it to not be Sioux tribe story. It was Sugar Island Ojibwe tribe. I think that helped because I didn't know how to tell a fictional story about my real tribe without it being a documentary or a statement that maybe I wasn't authorized to speak about my tribe in that way. So I took creative license with it, and I'm glad that I did. Everyone's been the response has been overwhelmingly positive. I did get an early review from someone who is Indigenous from, in the Southwest. And they were like, man, those Northern natives, they give it all away. Like they tell too much. And, and that's valid. Different tribes kind of pull that curtain in different more so than others. I felt confident with what I shared and what I didn't. So.
Okay. So let's see. Somebody wants to know what you're reading now, or any other books that people should have on their radars. You have time to read?
I try to find, I listen to more audiobooks than I read, but I still find time to read. I would say Cherie Demeline, who wrote The Marrow Thieves, has a sequel that just came out or is coming out next week. It's called Hunting by Stars. And this is the best perk of being an author. Her agent sought out my agent to see if I would read an early copy and provide a book blurb. And I was just thrilled because The Marrow Thieves is one of my favorite books in the world.
Oh,
And so to be able to read that sequel, I loved it. I love everything that she writes. You know, Kelly Jo Ford, her Crooked Hallelujah, talk about voice.
had a chance to.
Erica T. Worth. She has this book called Crazy Horse's Girlfriend. And I feel like chapter 1 should be included in every MFA program. Just
Mhm.
the way it sets the stage for this story, and just, yeah. And Darcy Little Badger. So yeah, she wrote Alatsui, which I read and loved. And then she has a new book that's coming out, Snake Falls to Earth, which was just longlisted for the National Book Award. And that is just, I'm just so thrilled for her. What an accomplishment. So yeah,
So those are some that people here on the Facebook should be looking out for.
yeah. I'm excited for, I'm trying to read, The Seed Keeper is on my to be read list. And then a book coming out that's called Probably Ruby. It's by Lisa Bird Wilson. It's coming out in Canada. I'm really excited about reading that. So
And then this is a writer's question. So this one must be a writer. How did you find time to write while working a day job?
yeah.
And any words of advice for aspiring writers?
Something happened to me in my mid 40s. I've never been a morning person, but in my mid 40s, I started drinking coffee. I started getting up an hour earlier, and then it was 2 hours. And then my favorite thing was like getting up at 4:30 in the morning and writing from 5 o'clock until the very last minute before I needed to catch the metro to be at my desk in DC by 9:30. And I just loved my morning creative. It was when I felt the most creative. And so yeah, morning writing for me is the best. And when you wake up with story and you just can't wait to get it down
Well,
on paper.
kind of what you're saying is find your writing time, the time that
Yeah,
works best for you, and then
right.
practice, a steady, dedicated practice.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
So I know that we're running close to end of time here. Are there any last questions that anyone wants to pop into the chat?
And I'll say that anyone who follows me on Instagram, shoot me a direct message if you would like a signed book plate. My lighting is really bad, but I have these like little book plates. I can personalize it with your name and sign my name to it.
Yeah.
So, and I'm happy to do that. So if you want a signed book plate, just pop a message on Instagram and let me know your mailing address and any personalization.
Okay. Any questions that we didn't ask that you were dying to answer?
Um, uh, we need diverse books was an important part of my journey to getting published. So I was, and their deadline for their mentorship program, I think will be at the end of October. So We Need Diverse Books is a nonprofit organization that believes every child should be seen in a book. And I did a year-long mentorship with a young adult author named Francisco Stork, and it was incredible. It really gave me a leg up when I went to look for an agent and then my publishing deal. That was really good exposure. So check out We Need Diverse Books. And I believe we're working on a fundraiser to set up a native a website or a program within We Need Diverse Books that's for Native creatives. So
Okay. The library is sharing that they have copies of Angeline's recommended books on order. So the ones that she mentioned will be there. So we're up on the time for this evening. Angeline, it is so wonderful to have you here with us. And I know that you are busy, 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 and to take out the time to be here. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
This has been a virtual presentation of Club Book, a long-running literary series of MELSA made possible by the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. Special thanks to Dakota County Library for the part they played in bringing Angeline to us. And before you log off, look for the book club survey link, which will be in the comments and will be projected in place of the video here. Last, consider joining Club Book on Monday, September 20th for a talk with memoirist Chan Julie Wang, author of Beautiful Country. Wang is the daughter of undocumented Chinese immigrants. During her formative years, the family's illegal status took a toll on everything, their housing stability, her parents' marriage and health, as well as Wang's own self-worth and identity. These childhood trials and traumas form the basis of Wang's anticipated memoir, drafted almost entirely on her iPhone while she commuted to and from her Brooklyn law office. Talk about how to find time for writing, huh? This one will be co-hosted by Hennepin County Library, and as always, it's free. They'll be right here on Facebook Live. Thank you all for coming so much. Thank you, Angeline. Great to see you. And that one with Wang will be here on Facebook Live also.
Yep.
Miigwech.
Miigwech.